Something I've always found interesting when talking about character strengths and weaknesses is what makes a character low tier. Oftentimes players tend to hyperfixate on the wrong type of weaknesses that should always remain the same. A prime example is looking at characters' defensive options and thinking a DP will solve all their issues. And while it will obviously be useful and beneficial for the character, weak defense is typically given on purpose towards characters within certain archetypes, let's say the Grapplers, or any character with more front-loaded offensive capabilities. So a character like Zangief should have weak defense, for example. Slow and expensive reversal, a 4-framer that requires a drive for us to confirm really, and typically low reward, and of course, they have no Dragon Punch. In turn, other parts of their kit in theory should compensate. However, what often happens is how character strengths aren't good enough, or simply put, there are flaws within their character strengths. These flaws can manifest themselves due to a number of reasons, either the system mechanics, implied direction, or just numbers are undertuned. So let's talk about a few examples. An easy one to talk about is Ryu from Streets. Ryu's typical design is a footsie Shoto character, a more defensive character to his counterpart Ken, with strong neutral buttons that make him hard to approach. In one area where he's supposed to excel is this fireball game, a solid poke that doesn't yield much reward, but can make the ground game more difficult to approach. If used correctly, it can slow down forward advancements from your opponent while always being able to recover to DP any sort of jump in given proper spacing. And while I would never normally say in any other Street Fighter that Ryu's fireball game is weak, it's definitely weaker in comparison to Ken in Street Fighter 6. Now, while I spoke about this before, I'm just going to reiterate it in this video because it matches the theme. This isn't necessarily related to the normal fireballs, but to EX versions of Hadouken. Given the fireballs clash in this game and the drive rush as a mechanic, EX fireballs will allow you to punish opponents and provide either big damage or corner carry given the follow-up. And this is typically due to the fact that Ryu's fireball knocks down while the other ones keep them standing. So while this is a legacy mechanic that typically it's good for Ryu, ends up being a crucial flaw to what's supposed to be a noble and potent difference between the characters. To move away from this system mechanic, I wanted to talk about Grappler archetype and one thing that Zangief specifically falters compared to the rest. As an archetype, grapplers are known for their terrifying pressure up close but suffer in other ways. As stated earlier, defense is typically a weak point for grapplers as their trade-off is for their stronger offense. Additionally, neutral can also tend to suffer. They typically have limited strong tools to pick from. Usually grapplers are quite big and slow, making it harder to approach, and the frame data is often weak in comparison to the rest of the cast. Given these weaknesses, they typically take time approaching in neutral by bulldogging their opponent into the corner. To make this strategy effective, it's important to have buttons to stop aggressive approaches on the ground and in the air. And while a grappler like Zangief has some large buttons on the ground, like his crouching jab, maybe his standing medium punch, his anti-airs can be an issue. Lariat traditionally is a powerful anti-air. It's a simple input and typically very strong at stopping jump-ins. However, things have changed in Street Fighter 6. Due to the long startup and when your anti-air iframes kick in, it can be stuffed if done too late. This will require Zangief players to stay alert and anti-air earlier in order to avoid the issue from occurring. Another way to alleviate this weakness is by using EX Lariat, as the startup of the move is much faster. However, this can be rather taxing for Zangief as he's using a lot of his drive gauge during combos or just walking blocking in neutral. And this still doesn't cover the biggest weakness it truly has, which is cross-ups. In Street Fighter 6, Lariat doesn't cover cross-ups at all, meaning at certain distances, Zangief can't reliably anti-air approaches without giving up space like doing an air-to-air. And while I've just mentioned Lariat, his other AA options aren't that great either. Air SPD is more really a read done aggressively, his level 1 is complete garbage, and his ground buttons aren't that useful for anti-air. That down heavy is abysmal. Charge heavy punch does have some niche usage at certain ranges, but I wouldn't call it dependable. The weakness is unwarranted and should never be within the grappler archetypes. Clearly, from my perspective, Zangief is meant to have strong anti-airs, but they simply are undertuned and require further adjustments. And finally, I want to mention one more character that has flaws within their strengths, which is Jamie. Now, this is a little note. I really did think in the early stages of Street Fighter 6, Jamie had a lot of potential. I wasn't convinced that he was going to be a strong character, but I didn't think he would be particularly as bad as he ended up being. And to be honest, it's just because his weaknesses are just too great and, quite frankly, bizarre. And while I won't go into all of them, I specifically want to mention the ones that really should not exist given its archetype. Jamie is a successor to Yang and Yun, two terrifying rushdown characters in Street Fighter history. But as a rushdown character, Jamie sacrificed something very important to achieve achieve their win condition, which is Oki. A rushdown character giving up the Oki is a tragic statement. This is a normal streak that this archetype typically has all over the place, off any sort of knockdown, off throws, off everything. Strong pressure that follows suits afterwards is a given. However, without drinks, the character is useless. So in turn, the install has to make up for it. The strange part to me though about Jamie is how the install moves he unlocks feel either weak or should just be a part of his base kit without any drinks at all. His target combo at level 1 feels like it should just be baseline, and the dive kick at level 1 as well is kind of underwhelming and has this massive hurt box, which is so tragic to think about. At level 2, the anti-air projectile tool that the rushdown character needs feels quite frankly a little bit too weak. A little bit on the slow side, needs maybe a little bit more range, and stuff like that. Followed up by a risky overhead target combo that doesn't really feel like it's worth doing majority of the time. Now afterwards, the rest of the unlocks feel good, and it makes sense to be giving up your Oki for it. A command grab is incredible, he has a really good shimmy tool, and I believe it's the back heavy punch. These are strong tools in level 3, and level 4 just provides them a lot more damage and better routing. But normally, given the pacing of Street Fighter and how you will be spending your drive gauge, health bars that have been depleting, it's hard to really take advantage if you've gone to that state already. Rushdown characters shouldn't be giving up so much for what I think is so little. And either he needs Oki, which I don't think will ever happen, or the unlocks just need to be stronger and compensate. And maybe in turn also that some of these tools that he gets during the unlock need to just be baseline. These flaws within character strengths manifest themselves within every fighting game. You'll see them regardless of what fighting game you're talking about. We're talking about slower paced fighting games like Street Fighter or Grand Blue. We're talking about anime fighters like Strive. We're talking about team-based fighters like the Project L that's going to come up. They will happen everywhere. But what's important is that the community focuses on these problems that are flaws within character strengths rather than things that just characters should never have in the first place. I'm tired of seeing people suggest, please give my character a Dragon Punch. Because for the love of God, I'm not trying to see Lily with a real TP. But anyway, those are my rambles. What do you guys think? Like, comment, subscribe, you know the YouTube stuff. I'll see you next time. This has been Behe. Peace.